Hello, I'm Viv. I'm a plant monster from space and I don't eat people. Not that you'd have to worry about that. Anyway, I love Final Fantasy and I love cardboard, so when the powers that be dropped the bomb that is the Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy set on me, the target audience, I made a vow. No matter how many legends there are in this Garfield Forsaken set, I would build every single one into a commander deck. So 164 legendary creatures and one rule change allowing vehicles later, I did. All of them. Cloud of Darkness, built it. Snow, done. The Lunar Whale, a much worse version of both the Belligerent and the Reality Chip. You bet your stinky bones I did. You see all those legend rankings in your feed? Yeah, they're great videos, but they are severely under-researched. Did they spend 3 hours on Scryfall trying to find any synergy for Rosa Resolute White Mage besides, wow, look, a +1/+1 counter? Well, I did, and let me tell you, there's not a whole lot. I didn't do any Through the Ages stuff, though. The world can survive without another Winota deck, I think. These lists are mostly going to be built for brackets 2 and 3. Some will be stronger by the nature of the words printed on them, but I'm aiming for all of them to at least be able to win a game of Commander. These will not be the only ways to build these decks, and they will absolutely not be the best way. I would love to hear how all of you chose to build each Commander, or any fun suggestions or interactions that I might have missed. We're going to be organizing this by Final Fantasy game, so I'll be summarizing my feelings on my favorite and least favorite Commanders to build from each numbered entry, and I'll do my best to mention any decks that stood out to me enough that I want to build them out or test them over a longer period. All the deck lists from this video will be in the description should you want to yoink them for yourselves. Oh, and I should probably mention that this is going to be in a lot of parts. I don't want to make a 7-hour video. I don't have the hard drive space for that. And I think that's finally enough yapping. Let's get to the juice. FF1 starts us out pretty simple. Garland, Knight of Cornelia, has a great deal of text on him, but the only part we really care about is this first line. Surveilling one off of every non-creature spell fills the graveyard very, very quickly, and we're trying to get value off of that. Cards like Faithless Looting, Brass's Tunnel Grinder, and Unexpected Windfall are already very, very good at moving cardboard between zones, and Garland just makes them more efficient. Lots of this cardboard is going to be non-creature spells to trigger Garland Surveilling, so we're playing into that with cards like Past in Flames and Mizzix's Mastery in order to blow up once our graveyard is full. The rest of the cards we're milling are just going to be the scariest assholes you've ever seen and ways to reanimate them. Doom Whisperer, Valgavoth, and Villas are terrifying engines that win the game by themselves. And that's our game plan. Fill our yard, scare our opponents with big dudes, and slowly beat them to death. This is a pretty fragile strategy, so later in the game we have big haymakers like Rise of the Dark Realms to help close things out with cards like Sir Conrad and Grey Merchant of Asphodel. If you wanted to power up Garland a little more to make willing early more viable while holding on to the same strategy, he plays very nicely into combos that want some pieces in the yard like Animate Dead World Gorger or Blood Artist Soul Trader loops. Garland is fun. Dragon's Rage Channeler is a great card, and having one in the command zone gives a lot of room to work with. But if you're ever playing that second effect, you are having a really, really bad game. And that's it for FF1. The original game only has one legend, so he is both my favorite and least favorite guy, which is fitting for the mixed bag that he brings. I really like having Darcy in the command zone, and that one line allows for a really open-ended commander that absolutely does its job. On the flip side, literally, Chaos is unplayably bad. The most exciting part of Garland is never, ever going to be the reason you play him, and that's kind of sad. Let's talk about a build-around I'm much more excited about. Sid Timeless Artificer is not particularly compelling upon first glance, and after 3 extremely unexciting variations, I was ready to dismiss Sid as nothing but a cool idea. That is, of course, until the heavens parted, and the mother of all cycling synergies descended from the heavens like a Scryfall search unto the gods. This is an Astral Slide deck, and Sid pulls double duty here. First of all, the 14 Sids and the 99 are here to be blink spells. You could probably run more, but I wanted one of each art, the turbo nerd that I am. We have plenty of high-value blink targets, and we're mostly focused on controlling the board early with cards like Riptide Gearhulk and Lauren. Once we've got a hold on our engine, we're going to use the Sid in the command zone to buff up our artifact token-based win cons. Canoptic Scarab Swarm and Mer Battlesphere absolutely get the job done, but Threefold Thunderhulk is an absolute house in this deck. Not only do the Thunderhulk's gnome tokens get pumped by Sid, but the Thunderhulk itself will have its power buffed, meaning that when it gets blinked from, say, a Sid being cycled under an Astral Slide, we get even more gnomes that also get pumped by Sid. This gets out of control very quickly, and while it isn't the fastest deck in the West, Sid can absolutely steal games from out of nowhere. I will admit that Sid himself probably isn't the best commander in the command zone. Shorkai might fill the slot better, but I was absolutely astonished by this deck's performance, and is sort of what inspired this whole project in the first place. There's probably room for like an unwinding clock package in here now that I'm thinking about it. That might be fun. I had some ideas about Firion right out of the gate, and he's a little weird in that all of my preconceived notions were absolutely correct. Firion is very explosive, but a lot of his value comes from his ability to meaningfully transition into the long game. We run plenty of low-cost equipment, and more importantly, equipment with low equip costs that Firion gets to attach for free. There are some others like Reaver Cleaver that get to be in here because, well, they're just really good to copy. A lot of the fun here comes from the quirks of Firion's ability. Any 4 Mirrodin or Job Select cards get some neat extra value in that they leave an extra token behind. Temporary copies of Bloodforged Battle Axe leave permanent ones after they connect. Goblin Engineer, Scrap Welder, and Duretti can all sacrifice copied equipment to return extra scary stuff from your graveyard, and don't even get me started on extra combat cards like Hexblade Wallbreaker. This is generally how we'll be winning the game. I'm not usually a big fan of Voltron decks, but this doesn't really play like one. It provides an interesting flow that more one-dimensional variations of the strategy seem to be missing, and that makes this one of the more fun game plans I've ever seen come out of Mono Red while not necessarily folding to a single removal spell. Vandal Blast might do some damage, but what can you do? Minwu was not my favorite build. Maybe that's because I didn't try hard enough, but no matter how I look at this guy, I could only see a single angle. Soul Sisters. Soul Warden, Soul's Attendant, and the many, many other clerics that share this effect are going to be triggering Minwu constantly. This can make your board really big really fast, so we are also dedicating quite a large chunk of our deck to protection for our extremely valuable and potentially scary 5-mana commander. Thankfully, lots of these protection pieces double as clerics. Mother and Giver of Runes are just generically good, and they have an even tighter niche here. In fact, a lot of generically good white staples happen to be clerics. Archivist of Ogma and Weathered Wayfarer are probably ending up in your mono-white deck anyway, and now they can double as huge beaters, while Wizened Mentor can give you some blockers while also triggering your sisters again. If they do manage to take care of Minwu even through all of your protection, Heliod and Archangel of Thune do a decent job filling in for him. It's a fine deck, and it works. It's nice Soul Sisters have a really dedicated commander in mono-white now. I might have wished the deck just didn't, build itself, but I'll save my complaining for later. So, Emperor Mateus. As much as I am a certified hater of non-deterministic Storm, I am a big fan of this guy. Most of the reason for that is because it's really hard to play non-deterministic Storm with an average mana value of 3.98. Our goal here is to flip the Emperor early while throwing our entire library into the bin. Most of this is going to be with 4 mana value spells, so we can be adding counters to Mat as we go. All these 4 mana value spells fall into either the card advantage or interaction categories, with a notable attempt to find cards that do both. Ill-Timed Explosion, Fateful Showdown, and Channeled Force are 3 cards you have likely never heard of, but they check all these boxes and do a ton of work in here. Once our yard is full of cards and you have Hellboy flipped, we have to win the game. Harmonic Prodigy will double each side of Mat, making him flip quicker and also evaporate the table faster. Uncivil Unrest and Fiery Emancipation absolutely melt every other player if they resolve with a flipped Mat ready to attack, and extra combats via Seize the Day, Full Throttle, or FOMO help push those last little bits of damage through. I am the furthest thing from an Izzet player, and you can probably do much sillier and more effective things with a more thorough knowledge of the card pool, but this is actually one of the decks I find myself returning to the most. I am a silly stompy player at heart, and in a way, this is sort of just a much more blue version of that. FF2 has 4 commanders and they all have their own strengths, but the least interesting build around was without a doubt Minwu. He's just so incredibly one-dimensional, and barring something goofy and nonsensical like, I don't know, Maskwood Nexus, Spirit Link, Walking Ballista, Minwu being turned into the jankiest Heliod deck you've ever seen. He just doesn't have the text to be interesting outside of his niche. Sid, on the other hand, that's my boy. I sort of hinted at it, but this was a project I started on a whim, not expecting to really enjoy my time, but wanting to work my deck building muscles. I built Sid early on, and this changed my point of view completely. Is he the most powerful deck in the world? Absolutely not. What he does do, however, no other card is capable of, and can result in some hideous plays that are just so interesting. And that's our vibe. Now I have to follow that up by building Cloud of Darkness. Oh boy. So we just finished talking about niches. What is Cloud of Darknesses? Well, it's the only 5-mana Golgari legend that doesn't have a persistent effect and is thus okay with doing her thing and then perishing instantly. Yeah, it's not much, but maybe we can do something with that. First of all, we care about filling our graveyard, and for that we have the usual suspects in Ripples of Undeath, Malevolent Rumble, and every dredge card known to man. If you've played a BGX graveyard deck before, you've seen this. We're also running the generic payoff of Colossal Grave Reaver with a bunch of solid reanimation targets, with our number 1 being Lumra. Yes, our second sub-theme is lands. We're filling up our yard while getting some landfall payoffs like Ob Nixilis, our Iridescent Vine Lasher out, and then mass reviving all of our lands with Aftermath Analyst, Splendid Reclamation, or, once again, Lumra. So what does the Cloud have to do with this? Well, its mana value is 5, and Lumra's is 6. That means that Birthing Pod and Eldritch Evolution can both immediately Windmill Slam Lumra onto the battlefield and win the game on the spot. Yeah, that's what I got. If you dump Lumra by accident, you can search for Metamorphosis Fanatics, so that's neat. You may argue this is a Lumra deck and not a Cloud of Darkness deck, and to that, I have no retort whatsoever. So Xande is similar to the Cloud of Darkness in that he wants your graveyard extremely full, but this time the payoff is closer to worth it. It's extremely easy to get Xande in the 2-shot range with some classic blue-flavored self-mill with Hedron Crab, Traitorous Kanta, and oh hi, Ripples of Undeath, fancy meeting you here. Now that we're in blue, we also have access to Traumatize, which we will be using on ourselves to get a massive Xande out of nowhere. But what do we do when Xande gets big? Well, first of all, we can bonk. We have a few one-sided board wipes in Mandate of Abaddon, Toxic Deluge, and Dead of Winter that let us get in uncontested, as well as Rogue's Passage and Artful Dodge to squeeze through blockers. Unfortunately, we are not in red, so we don't have access to the best card in Magic the Gathering, Fling. But we do have a couple color-shifted variations in Rite of Consumption and Essence Harvest. We can also capitalize on Xande's massive ass with Ruthless Technomancer to generate massive amounts of mana and Disciple of Bolas to draw our entire deck, letting us end the game with Lab Maniac or Jace Wielder of Mysteries. You can also use Thoracle for this, but the day I slot one of those into my deck is a cold day in hell. The rest of the deck is a massive suite of interaction for our super slow game plan. Blowing up a dude or countering a spell to make Xande bigger is frankly most of what we'll be doing. Essentially, we're Stompy players learning what control is, and that's really nice, I think. There are only 2 commanders for FF3, and I have a mild fondness for both, so this is gonna make me a little sad. Cloud of Darkness is terrible. There's no way around this. I can make the 6-drop package as cool as I want. There really is no way for you to be playing Cloud of Darkness over the 75,000 other strong Golgari legends, and even if I did have a good time figuring out the game plan that uses her, I would never recommend anybody put this in the command zone. Whereas Xande is a big bonky fellow, and that is the fastest way to my heart. Xande lets you play the huge guy game plan from behind the resilient veneer of blue-black control. I was a little surprised when I first tried this guy out, and my initial drafts were absolute garbage, but once I embraced the control plan with the big boy payoff, Xande really started to feel at home. And this is a nice niche, and not just Lumra with extra steps. Golbez is a really open-ended design, and just as one might expect, that made the deck a lot of fun to build. My personal take uses that last ability in his text box to burn down the entire table because I think that's the funniest possible thing you can do with him. So how do we get creatures big enough to burn down the table? Our solution comes from silly little guys like Broodstar here. Stars in a creature's power and toughness box means that whatever effect changes the creature's stats apply everywhere, not just on the field. In Broodstar's case, that means that if we fill the battlefield with junk, Golbez can burn the table down in potentially a single turn. We have a few other Broodstars in Master of Ethereum and Darksteel Juggernaut, but we need to make them huge first, and that means we need a lot, and I mean a lot, of artifacts. Sai, Stridehanger Automaton, and Forensic Gadgeteer are all recurable with Golbez, and if dropped early can get the board absolutely swarming. But we have a few ways of generating a great deal of tokens with some untapping synergies involving clocks, keys, and Collector's Vault or Nuka-Cola vending machine, the latter of which can create a few 3-card infinites with the MVP of this deck, Academy Manufactor. We have other ways of capitalizing on all these tokens if Golbez ends up incapacitated. Mirkwood Bats turns all of our treasures, food, and clues into a lethal minefield. Junkwinder turns the game off completely once your engines are online, and my personal favorite, Cyberdrive Awakener, turns our goofy pile into an immediately lethal swing. Mech Titan Core is also a really funny card and fits perfectly here. Don't forget that every single token you make triggers Golbez's Surveil, meaning you can churn through your deck absurdly fast. This is a pile of tangled synergies and could probably do with a bit more focus, but reanimating a Broodstar and bringing the table for total damage numbers in the triple digits will never not be funny. Giott cares a lot about dwarves and equipment, which is pretty convenient as a lot of the playable dwarves also care about equipment. This man will teach you the value of card selection whether you like it or not, because that second effect is extremely powerful. Giott is very consistent for an equipment deck, but he doesn't do anything particularly over the top. Our game plan is to dump dwarves onto the battlefield while equipping them and smacking. It's not particularly innovative, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun. Brunor Battlehammer, Cole the Forge Master, Rayav Master Smith, and CEDH staples Magda and Tataru all fit into the category of dwarf that does what we want, but looking outside of the generically good dwarves, Vault Robber can create some value since we spend so much time discarding, Restoration Specialist can recur our scarier equipment or anything else we discarded early, and Dwergar Hedgemage is a versatile removal spell on a body that I have never heard of before. They all also happen to be dwarves. Did you know that Reckless Crew makes dwarves? Well, now you do. Outside our dudes in removal, we are simply running the scariest equipment you will find outside of Godo. Commander's Plate, Beantown Beatstick, and Shadow Spear all come down early, trigger our commander, and make our board very scary, while our top end of Cauldron Complete, Genji Glove, and Hammer of Nazan make up our small pile of things no one wants to see drop from a Stoneforge Mystic, with a whole lot of other aggressive beat pieces in the middle. This is definitely not the most unique game plan, but equipment players are gonna equipment, and Giott does incentivize you to bring up your dwarf density, which sets him apart enough that I enjoyed building him. Rydia is another lands deck, but she wants us to put our focus on a funky card type, Sagas. Before the Final Fantasy set, there was not a ton of overlap between these two archetypes, but thankfully Rydia has just enough support to make something happen with the new Saga creatures, or as I will be calling them for the foreseeable future, summons. Our first goal is to mill ourselves. Rydia's landfall ability means she has no problem getting rid of any targets we would prefer not to be in our hand, but in terms of getting cards into the graveyard, we've been through this before. 6, Malevolent Rumble, and Life from the Loam do this by themselves, but Altar of Dementia lets us turn our Saga creatures into more fuel for Rydia's summon ability since they're probably just gonna die anyway. Speaking of Rydia's ability, we have a few important targets. Brynhildr and Fable of the Mirror Breaker are solid early targets for both ramp and seeing more cardboard, but our big hits are Kujata and Bahamut, who each do a fantastic job of thinning out the board, as well as the Mending of Dominaria and There and Back Again to provide us with mid-game threats. Titan is probably this deck's best creature, immediately entering, filling our yard with both more summons for Rydia and lands to fuel his second chapter. This is the first of our many splendid reclamation effects for our landfall plan, which I guess I've hinted at long enough. Rule has some of the best payoffs around with Angry Omnath, Morag, and Scoot Swarm. These are overwhelmingly powerful cards by themselves and will probably win you the game instantly after a Titan or Lumma resolve. Dropping a Lotus Cobra or Nissa early makes activating Rydia's ability much, much easier, and Springheart Nantuko can potentially make extra copies of super powerful summons like Bahamut, which is so funny. Rydia is more than anything resilient. This deck just cockroaches back from anything, but that's what happens when you put 500 lands onto the battlefield by turn 6, I guess. It's landfall with a twist. Nothing particularly out there, but I'd call her fun enough. Kain. God, where do I start with this guy? Kain reads terribly. Just awfully. He got spoiled real early, and I remember having a really, truly visceral reaction to this text box. It's written in such a way that makes it extremely hard to abuse. Your opponent has to gain control of Kain for you to draw the cards or make the treasures, and then he doesn't even force the opponent to attack with him, meaning they can just hold him hostage forever. But if there is any commander I love to build, it's a bad one. So I did. And Kain is currently the only deck in this entire list I have built out in paper. This is some of the most fun I have ever had in Commander. First of all, Kain needs to rotate around. Goad is basically mandatory unless you're absurdly good at politicking, so we are running a lot of it. Both Black Vows, both Black Impetuses, Impeti, doesn't matter. Eye of Nidhogg, Bloodthirsty Blade, and Assault Suit are all here to make sure Kain gets to go. We also have to make sure he's protected. We're running a ton of the Black Death protection effects in case somebody finds a sack outlet or gets tired of him accelerating the table. These also have the benefit of returning Kain to you if they go off, meaning you get more cards and more treasures. We're also running quite a few board wipes, a few of which, namely Necromantic Selection, 0-Point Ballad, and Blood on the Snow, will wipe the board while leaving Kain in our hands. Of course, the easiest way to keep control of Kain is with the deck's MVP, Homeward Path, which we are running both maps to find. And since we're in mono black and running the maps, Cabal Coffers and Urborg are here to give us more mana than we could ever need. But how do we actually win? Well, other than the funniest hatred anybody has ever cast in the history of Magic the Gathering, and just beating people to death with a cranial plating or nettle cyst, we have a lot of ways to punish Kain's effects. Sheoldred is the big one, but Scrawling Crawler does a solid impression. Mirkwood Bats and Nadir's Nightblade let you sack all your treasures to obliterate the table, and Torment of Hailfire gives you something to spend all your mana on. Xenos is being run because I really want to name Kain with him. I just think that's really funny. And that's what the deck is. Really, really funny. It's not going to hold its own at a high power table. No one is ever going to leave this guy alive for any reasonable amount of time once you go above like bracket 2, but if you find the right table, being able to say, oh, just draw a couple cards, it might make your turn better, is so hilarious to me. This is Mono Black Group Hug. It's the goofiest thing I've ever built, and golly gee, does it make me happy? Ah, non-deterministic storm, my old nemesis. Tellah, regardless of any other text, always makes a 1/1 hero when you cast a non-creature spell. This, combined with Izzet's innate ability to throw around cardboard like a Yu-Gi-Oh player on a combo turn, lets him absolutely flood the board with little dudes. From here, we can gain an advantage in any number of ways, but my favorites for this style of deck are Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar. This lets us turn our dudes into mana, and as a consequence makes our turns horrifically long, especially when combined with a Skull Clamp to just draw an unholy amount of cards. Fortunately, Tellah also comes with a way for us to finish off the table. Once we turn our army into mana, we can use it to fuel some of our massive X spells like Epic Experiment, Starstorm, and Crackle with Power. Tellah will explode along with these, making the damage threshold you need to actually end the game much lower than the cards would allow by themselves. The problem with this game plan is that Tellah is an absolute removal magnet. You're in blue, so you can protect him with counterspells, but at 5 mana, holding up extra mana just to wall off removal the turn you play in is a big ask. For this reason, we're running a metric ton of ramp, because if Tellah dies, your game plan falls apart real fast. Also, I just want to add, this style of deck is so boring for me, and Tellah creates a particularly nasty version of it. It's really fun to play Solitaire with if you just want to Goldfish on Moxfield, but you would never catch me playing with this against real people. Wowie, look at that, our first legendary vehicle commander. I hinted about it in the intro, but the Lunar Whale is almost certainly just a worse version of the reality chip. We're a combo deck that accumulates value by effectively drawing cards from the top of our deck every turn. Our main combo wins will almost always involve Sensei's Divining Top and any other card that reduces artifact costs like Foundry Inspector or Ethereum Sculptor. This, combined with the Lunar Whale, lets us draw our entire deck. A small advantage the whale has over the jellyfish is the fact that it comes online for 1 less mana. This lets us execute the combo as early as turn 3. Most of the time, though, we don't want to be doing that because we will probably die without extra mana to cast something like Lab Maniac or Reliquary Tower to hold on to the 80 or so cards you just drew. Yes, Thoracle would be good, but once again, pigs will fly when I win a game with that stupid fish. We run a Grip of Interaction and a Displacer Kit in our Chaomancer package to keep the train running in the late game, but this is where the Lunar Whale runs into some pretty massive problems. With the reality chip, this interactive plan feels pretty okay, but not being able to cast counterspells from the top of your deck on your opponent's turns is a really, really big disadvantage and results in the whale having to go for combos at inopportune times when a deck like the reality chip is much more than capable of waiting for a better chance. I'm not usually a combo player, if you could tell, but this is kinda cool. I might look into the reality chip for some more flexibility if I really wanted to commit to a list like this, but the whale was a little more fun to build than I initially gave it credit for. Just a little. Rosa might be the most underwhelming card on this entire list at face value, and, well, she is, but this deck functions and I'm calling that a win for me. We are pretty generically mono-white with an emphasis on +1/+1 counters. Rosa provides a pretty steady supply of them, so cards that interact with counters are in high demand here. Brigone, Dusk Legion Duelist, and Exemplar of Light are the best because they put more cardboard in our hands. We do our best to protect our board as we build it out with Selfless Spirit or Clever Concealment, and keeping our opponents under control with removal and one-sided board wipes like Winds of Abandon or Damning Verdict. All this, as well as the incidental life gain from Rosa, is to help us build up to our big bombs in Stormherd, Sigarda Summons, and Elesh Norn. Lots of cards in this deck are small legendary creatures, so the Sarima, Thalia's Lancers, and Recruiter of the Guard actually find most of the important creatures in our deck, and since we're running all that, we can throw a Kenrith's transformation on ourselves and toss in Ophelia to reuse these effects multiple times. Once again, this is very generic mono-white, but hey, it works. Am I gonna keep her around? No, but I might try a similar build with the Sarima in the command zone, because that card really does slap. I know this is a Final Fantasy list, but I pulled this card as my promo at the pre-release, and oh my god, I want to build it so bad. Cecil is one of the more interesting boyos on this list. A 1-mana 2/1 that hurts you isn't particularly strong in Commander, even with Death Touch and an underwhelming transformation, so what can we do here? Well, Cecil is cheap, and cheap creatures are quite disposable. Culling the Weak, Nasty End, and Call of the Ring all curve very beautifully off a guaranteed 1-drop, and our aggressive early turns can get us some fast value with cards like Gix, Adeline, and Timna. Wait a minute, that's Cecil! The problem with going all in on this aggressive plan is that most of the cards I just listed hurt us a lot, including the one we are trying to play on turn 1 every single game. So how do we turn that into an advantage for us? The answer to this, like every problem in life, is giant, big, stupid, dumb sorceries. Exsanguinate and Debt to the Deathless are the usual Orzhov big mana win conditions that will still do a solid job of keeping us alive if we're in a pinch, but this deck gets a little sillier with Profane Transfusion, Soul Conduit, and Repay in Kind. These 3 cards let us either bring our opponent's life totals down to the depths with us, or lets us swap life totals entirely, potentially eliminating players on the spot with the biggest goofballs of the deck, Phyrexian Unlife and Pact Weapon, letting us go into negative life totals. To facilitate this, we have a few friends that help us absolutely tank our life totals. Bolas' Citadel and Crick are probably the most valuable options in this category, letting us turn life into mana at a pretty absurd rate, but Doom Whisperer, Blood Celebrant, and Wall of Blood let us freely annihilate our life total, and in turn, the rest of the tables. Of course, we need a lot of mana to get this done, so we're running the maps with an Urborg Cabal Coffers package, as well as a Cryptghast, a metric ton of mana rocks, box and a bunch of tutors to help us find one of the many moving parts needed to make these silly payoffs worth it. Yes, this looks very dumb, and trust me, it is. But if I can win a game with this list, which I have, it means it was all worth something, right? And that's FF4. This has been the biggest pack so far with 8 whole commanders to look at, and I feel pretty strongly about these. Our worst commander has got to be the Lunar Whale. I want to shout out Rosa for being horribly uninteresting, and Tellah for enabling one of my least favorite playstyles, but the Lunar Whale is a much less interesting version of some already available effects, with a more difficult to achieve condition and none of the interactive flexibility. Do yourself a favor and just play the reality chip, that deck is cool. Best commander was hard. Cecil is a deck I am rather proud of. It's not good by any means, but turning this, I'm so sorry, dog shit beat stick with a downside into an on-theme early game engine makes me feel smart. But the winner has to be the one I built out in paper because I was having too much fun. Kain will not win you many games. He helps your opponents a lot, and there is no denying that, and Group Hug has never been an archetype I've been particularly fond of. Kain breaks this trend because of just how lethal he is. It sort of feels like putting a Descent into Avernus in the command zone, in that you get the first crack at the advantage, but the end result will be a much, much faster game. This means you get to play more games of Commander, and that makes me a happy girl. And now is the moment I pull the rug out from under you. I did not build every single commander in Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy. Some of these were built by the Dragoon who lives in my house, and I shamelessly stole them for my own benefit. Exdeath is a green-black self-mill deck, like Cloud of Darkness, but with a commander who has more to offer than the top 10% of the Magic card, namely, a really big number. Yes, we are back in my favorite territory, big f***ing guy deck. Exdeath mercifully comes with Trample, meaning if we can get him big enough, he easily starts one-shotting players. Transforming him is simple. The usual suspects are here: Malevolent Rumble, Aftermath Analyst, Ripples of Undeath, and Mesmeric, along with most of the rest of the deck serve to fill our graveyard with garbage. We do have a notable preference for cards that can do this while also having a massive body on their own, like Splinter Fright, Rite of the Reliquary, and Old Stickfingers. This is because of our synergy with high-power creatures. Jarad Golgari Lichlord is here as the poster child for this sort of payoff, but Disciple of Bolas and his cousins, Ruthless Technomancer, Shadowheart Baldur's Gate, and Greater Good are here to keep the value train moving. Ruthless Technomancer is particularly notable for letting you immediately recast or reanimate Exdeath, as well as any of the other hulking monstrosities that are part of this deck's Reanimator package. Colossal Gravereaver and Sir Conrad will just annihilate the table if left unchecked. Unlike Cloud of Darkness, this one I actually would recommend. He's not the flashiest commander, but sometimes a really big guy is what you need, and he absolutely fills that role while fitting nicely into an already cohesive shell. Yes, Jarad or like Yargle and Multani probably work better as the commander, but Exdeath is way less mana and a solid include in that 99 if you want to go that route. Oh, Bartz and Boko. I thought this card was pretty cool when it was spoiled, and I'm positive you could do something cool with them, but this is not a card that does very well in the command zone. The problem mostly comes from the pool of playable mono-green birds, or perhaps more accurately, the lack of one. Aside from the artifact ones that are at least decent in their own specific archetypes, the most playable birds in this color are Birds of Paradise, Gilded Goose, and Owlbear Cub, which provide a collective 3 power to Bartz and Boko's ability, and it all comes from that last one. Saz's Chocobo can get pretty big, and Traveling Chocobo provides a little bit of value, but for the most part, the best birds we can play are things like Chameleon Colossus, which limits our game plan pretty significantly. That being said, there is still a glimpse of something here. Curving out with the cheaper birds, or more ideally, cards like Metallic Mimic that actually have a power stat, lets us drop Bartz and Boko very early because of the affinity for birds ability, hopefully disrupting an opponent by removing an essential piece like an early commander or Esper Sentinel or something. At this point, we want some way to recur the trigger. The best of which are Conjurer's Closet and Temur Sabertooth, with this guy in particular being our outlet to the only cool thing I could figure out in this deck. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, turns all of our non-token creatures into forests, and Traveling Chocobo doubles landfall triggers, meaning that with it, 2 other birds, Ashaya, Temur Sabertooth, and anything that makes mana when you landfall, you'll be able to absolutely crank out Bartz and Boko triggers. Sure, this is a minimum 6-card combo that doesn't give you anything besides a very limited removal engine, but no, I don't have a but, this just sucks. Fauna Shaman, Court of Calling, and Shared Summons can help you find the pieces, but realistically you're winning with a Pathbreaker Ibex or a similar effect in Finale of Devastation. Bartz and Boko are not very good, but the card is funny, and if I ever build Ruka Rumel, it's gonna be Bird Slivers, and Bartz and Boko are gonna play a very key role. Gilgamesh is the final commander in this first batch, and this one is pretty cool. If you're at all familiar with Godo Bandit Warlord, this is kinda like that. The difference is that Gilgamesh doesn't instantly win the game when you cast him by finding Helm of the Host. This does not mean that he is not strong, because holy crap, this guy can win games. Our first priority is to dump Gilgamesh on the battlefield as soon as possible. For this reason, we are not only running a ton of mana rocks, but rituals in the form of Seething Song, Jeska's Will, and Mana Geyser, as well as the funniest answer, Treasonous Ogre, resulting in my favorite play the deck can make. Turn 2 Mana Rock, turn 3 Treasonous Ogre, pay 18 life, Gilgamesh. Lots of bonus points if we can give Gilgamesh haste to double up on its triggers. Of course, we are running Rabbit Battery, Kori Steelcutter, Samurai's Katana, and a pair of boots in Swiftfoot and Lava Spur to get that effect on our equipment, but there are some cards that let us do this without spending a free equip from our commander's effect on a less expensive piece. The big names here are Arena of Glory and Hall of the Bandit Lord, letting our land drops do the work all by themselves, but Generator Servant is especially strong for letting us play double duty as both a ritual and haste enabler. And now my favorite part. Payoffs. The strongest thing that Gilgamesh offers are the free equips, enabling bomb equipment like Genji Glove or Colossus Hammer, but only being able to equip one of them per trigger stops us from completely filling our deck with this sort of effect. This limitation makes equipment that do something simply by entering the battlefield much stronger in a Gilgamesh deck. Reconfigure cards like Komainu Battle Armor can absolutely power up Gilgamesh, but also provide blockers for defense against crackbacks, while the holy trinity of Living Weapon, 4 Mirrodin, and Job Select let us do some really threatening effects while diversifying our threats so our game plan doesn't fall apart after a single removal spell. On that topic, Conqueror's Flail is low-key the best card in this deck. We lose hard to counter spells, so turning them off lets us whack the blue player without them being able to interact with us in the least so the table can start having fun again. Disregarding silly things like interaction points though, the best cards in the deck are Helm of the Host and Blade of Selves. The latter will make copies of Gilgamesh whenever he attacks. These copies will die instantly due to the legend rule, but assuming you're in a 4-player game, that's 2 additional copies on every single attack. While Helm of the Host not only makes the token copy non-legendary, but also gives it haste, meaning we just get to have a second commander. If you don't get touched here, you probably win the game on the spot. Greg is probably the strongest deck I've built so far. It might be able to push into bracket 4 with a little more love and fast mana, but right now it feels like a strong 3 and Voltron in 4s is rough. It's great to play at the end of a long night when my brain is tired from thinking and I just want to hit people really hard. Big Viv approved from this guy. And finally, FF5 is done. Exdeath is a little one note, but there's something to be had there. Big f***ing creature is a very supported playstyle, and Self-Mill and Golgari is strong enough that this deck will totally win games. Bartz and Boko, on the other hand, there is very little hope here. Perhaps one day Mono Green Birds will receive more support, but until then, these two are probably gonna be aggressively okay in the 99 of bird decks that include green, and that's about it. They're maybe the worst commander in this whole video, and we talked about Rosa today. On the flip side, my favorite FF5 legend is Gilgamesh by a very wide margin. Voltron is a time-honored strategy, and while it might never be the strongest, removing players from the table as early as turn 3 will never not put a smile on my face, and once you get established, you can very quickly run away with a game, smacking them directly in the face for 50 plus unblockable commander damage before the control player even has enough mana to drop a disallow. And with that, we're done, at least for today. We covered 17 total commanders across the first 5 games in the Final Fantasy series. I have placed them on this tier list for your arguing pleasure. The criteria is literally nothing besides my personal enjoyment throughout the building and testing process, as my personal biases should not affect your enjoyment of any of these cards in any way whatsoever. This was a lot of fun. I already feel myself becoming a better deck builder, and we seem to be making very fast progress. Surely Final Fantasy VI will continue having a reasonable amount of legends to build, and I won't have to split it into 2 videos. Right? Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, I have a whole lot of shorts on Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm live on Twitch at twitch.tv/VivIsAngry Wednesday through Sunday. I mostly play Final Fantasy, but who knows? Perhaps we're building magic decks and I'm yelling about how much fun Kain is. Come and vibe or perish and all that. Until next time, goodbye, 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 goodbye.